Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. So welcome to this evening's Committee of Adjustment meeting. Members of the public, applicants, agents, and staff may be participating this evening either in person or virtually via Zoom. For those attending via Zoom, please note that it is our standard practice for members of the public to have their cameras off and microphones muted until it is time for the member to speak. Township staff can assist with muting microphones. If you require assistance, please use the chat function and ask staff. I'm pleased to advise that this is being broadcast live on the Township's YouTube channel, where a recording of this meeting will be available. Note the Township does not have the ability to edit the live stream or recorded versions of the meeting. Public meetings have been called and notice circulated in accordance with the Planning Act with respect to applications for minor variance and/or consent. The purpose of public meetings are to inform and provide the public with an opportunity to ask questions and express views with respect to the application. The format of the public meeting is as follows. Township staff will introduce the application and report on all correspondence received. Next, the applicant or their agent will present any relevant information. Township staff will then provide further information and clarify any statements the applicant or the applicant and or their agent. Following that, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And finally, members of the committee will be given an opportunity to ask questions for clarification of the application. After all comments have been received, the committee will consider the application with due regard to the presentations and views expressed this evening. The committee will then do one of three things. 1, approve the application. 2, deny the application, or 3, defer the application pending receipt of additional information. Specified persons who have provided oral submissions or written objections but disagree with the committee's decision on an application may appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as entitled under the Planning Act. The deadline for an appeal of consent applications is 20 days within the giving of notice, and for minor variances within 20 days of the decision date. When commenting on an application, please give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that the names and addresses for those individuals who speak at this meeting will appear within the meeting minutes, which are public documents. If you wish to receive a copy of the decision, please leave your name and address with township staff. I'm going to call for a motion for adoption. Oh, sorry. Yeah, here we go. Is there any, I'm going to ask committee members, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, I'm now going to call for a motion for the minutes from last meeting. So I have a motion before me identified as COA 2025-036, moved by member Kish, second by member Bossy, that the minutes of the July 15th, 2025 Committee of Adjustment meeting be adopted as printed and distributed. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, we are carried. We're going to move on. So would township staff briefly introduce the application and report on any written correspondence or written response to the notice circulated for adjourned application D1, which is a minor variance identified as A-35-22.
Thank you and good evening, Chair. As indicated, the first application on our agenda this evening is adjourned application for minor variance regarding the lands 3380 Russell Drive. As indicated, this is an adjourned application. It is not subject to a public meeting this evening. We did receive additional articles of written correspondence, which have been circulated to the committee in advance. Those comments included information from the Trent Severn Waterway stating that they retract previous comments related to the compliance of the shoreline width/coverage following receipt of the revised proposal. Comments were received from Christine Collin at 3300 Russell Drive discussing matters such as Trent Severn Waterway permissions, environmental and safety concerns, and visual impacts. Comments were received from Mary Hubbs, former resident of 3257 Lazy Lane, stating objections to the application for reasons related to environmental impacts and impacts to the on-site septic system. The committee may recall that this application's been before you twice. The lands are located just outside of the Port Severn settlement area and have frontage along the little lake of the Trent Severn Waterway on Gloucester Pool. The lands are currently developed with a single detached dwelling and various shoreline accessory structures, as well as other residential accessory structures. The minor variance application seeks to recognize these various accessory structures and shoreline structures initially constructed without the benefit of a building permit. A public hearing for this application was already held at the February 18th Committee of Adjustment meeting where it was deferred. The adjourned application was subsequently heard at the June 18th, 2025 meeting where it was again deferred with the following motion. The comments have now been received from the Trent Severn Waterway as circulated and as mentioned tonight. So the application is now before committee. The applicant has provided a revised proposal since the public hearing, which significantly reduces the number and scale of the minor variance request proposed through the application. As depicted on screen is a comparison and summary of the revised minor variance request. This is outlined in detail in the staff report that was published on the agenda this evening. So I can go over those now. The first request was respect to a shed with a minimum rear yard setback of 2.42 meters. The request remains the same, seeking a reduced setback of 2.42 meters to the municipal road allowance. As indicated on screen, the request with respect to maximum accessory structure covered is no longer required and is no longer requested. There's been a reduced request with respect to maximum width of shoreline structures, initially requested for 16.2 meters or 54%, now requested a cumulative width of 12 meters or 39%. Initial request with respect to the construction of 2 docks, this is no longer required or requested. A minimum side yard setback of 3.77 meters for a dock, this is no longer required nor requested. A maximum dock width of 5.7 meters. This is no longer required or requested. An unenclosed deck with a total area of 52 square meters, with 35.5 of that having a height greater than 1 meter above grade. This has been significantly reduced to an unenclosed deck with a total area of 32.9 square meters, including stairs. I would like to advise that the deck structure itself complies with the 30 square meters. The increased size is just to accommodate those access stairs. Of that, 19.5 square meters have a maximum height of 2.4 meters above grade. This is to recognize the existing height of that structure. It would not be getting taller. It would remain as is. The sauna with a side yard setback of 1.2 meters. This request remains the same. The site plan on the screen was provided by the applicant and depicts the revised proposal. Specifically, as highlighted, I would bring your attention to the reduced size of the deck and the dock. The overall proposed size of the decking structure itself is compliant with the township zoning bylaw. The slight increase in size, again, is just seeking to allow for those access stairs. The proposed height is understood to be a result of the exposed bedrock, which allows the structure to actually be located on top of the exposed bedrock, which facilitates a greater setback from the shoreline because it can be pushed back on top of that bedrock. In recognition of the public comments we'd received with concerns with respect to the height of the deck, staff have included a recommended condition which ensures the deck and its supporting structure remains uncovered and unenclosed with the exception of a guardrail if required by the Ontario Building Code. The variance request with respect to the docking structure is largely technical in nature as outlined in the staff report. As stated, the Trent Severn Waterway has retracted their comments pertaining to the increased shoreline coverage and width that is no longer applicable to the revised proposal. As depicted, the revised proposal contemplates the removal of the docking structure in front of the dryland boathouse. The township zoning bylaw does not distinguish between standard overwater boathouses and dryland boathouses in its calculation of shoreline coverage. So even though the dryland boathouse is set back 2 meters from the shoreline, it's still technically included in the calculation of shoreline coverage per the zoning bylaw. If we just consider the shoreline coverage of the docking structure that actually interacts with and is functionally and physically related to the shoreline, the coverage of the property is compliant with the zoning bylaw. The requests pertaining to the proposed shed and the sauna have not changed. Staff acknowledge public comments pertaining to the setback of the shed to the on-site septic system. The building department has reviewed the location of the shed relative to the septic system, and it appears to be well set away from the actual system itself. The proposed shed reduced setback also facilitates an even further setback from the on-site septic system. In addition to being reviewed through the minor variance process, the applicant would also have to demonstrate this compliance with the Ontario Building Code setbacks through their building permit applications. As discussed in the staff report and in the planning justification report provided by the applicant's agent, the revised proposal appears to be consistent with the PPS and satisfies the 4 tests for a minor variance. As indicated, there's various recommended conditions included to address the public comments received. Subject to the recommended conditions, staff have no objection to the provisional approval of the application. These specific conditions include largely standard conditions that we typically see with shoreline development. Municipal taxes be paid to date, construction in substantial compliance with the plan submitted. The owner enters into a development agreement to establish a vegetation protection zone, as well as provide those initial plantings and the collection of securities to ensure those plantings are in good condition for at least 24 months. Provide silt fencing and construction-related measures to protect the shoreline area during the construction and revegetation. This condition here, the subject deck and supporting structure shall remain uncovered and unenclosed except for the installation of a guardrail if required by the Ontario Building Code. All costs associated with the agreement and registration on title is the responsibility of the property owner. Number 4, the applicant applies and obtains in-water and shoreline works permit or an equivalent approval from the Trent Severn Waterway for the proposed alterations to the docking structures. And number 5, that the applicant demonstrate compliance with the township zoning bylaw to the satisfaction of the township pertaining to the dryland boathouse. I will just mention that as indicated in the planning justification report provided by the applicant's agent, they have provided evidence of the boathouse confirming its use as a boathouse and not as an alternative use as initially suggested. So subject to the recommended conditions, staff have no objections to the provisional approval of the application. This application is not subject to a public meeting, but the applicant and their agent are in attendance should the committee have any questions.
Thank you. Does the applicant or agent have anything further to add to the presentation? If you want to speak, Mr. Dravis, the microphone's there.
I just wanted to say that purchased it like that.
Okay. Okay. It's good. I know your agent popped up there, but you're good. Okay, that's good. You guys have anything more you want to add? Nope. So there's no public portion to this meeting. So I'm going to move on. Do members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Bossy.
Question about the deck. The underneath was a storage area enclosed. Have they removed all that, or was that deck never built?
Through the township staff.
Thank you through the chair to Member Bossy. As indicated in the staff report and in the recommended conditions, staff have included a condition to ensure that the deck remains unenclosed, so that through the registration of that agreement on title, if there is enclosure, it would be required to be removed, and any future homeowners would be aware that that space can't be enclosed.
Perfect. Member Kish.
Through the chair to township staff, what assurances are in place that the boathouse remains a boathouse and doesn't become a bunkie 6 months from now?
Through to staff.
Thank you through the chair to Member Kish. The township can't proactively plan for something that hasn't occurred yet. At this point in time, the information available has demonstrated that it is a dry land boathouse and is being used for that purposes as was legally permitted. The township does operate on a complaint basis. So if a complaint was received, the township would investigate.
Right. Seeing no further comments, going to move forward. So I'm going to call on a motion. So I have a motion before us identified as COA 2025-37, moved by Member Hawkins, second by Member Bossy, that staff report D25-025 be received and that the matter of minor variance application A-35-22, the revised proposal be provisionally approved subject to the recommended conditions outlined in attachment 5 to staff report D25-025. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You're free to leave. We're going to move on to the next application. So would township staff introduce the application and report on any written response to the notice circulated for adjourned application D2, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-03-25.
Thank you, Chair. As noted, this application was deferred previously at the February Committee of Adjustment meeting, so is not subject to a public meeting. This minor variance is A0325 for the lands located at 157 Brandon Avenue in Coldwater. As a reminder to the committee, this application seeks minor variances for a reduced interior yard setback and rear yard setback, together with an increased lot coverage to legalize an existing deck and shed on the property. The deck was constructed without the benefit of a building permit. There are provisions within the subdivision agreement which prohibit buildings and structures within the identified swale areas. As noted, this application was heard in February, where the committee deferred the application pending receipt of additional information and directed that this application be brought back for consideration by the August 2025 Committee of Adjustment meeting. Correspondence was received from the applicant after staff report D25-027 was published on August 15th and was separately circulated to the committee for consideration. That correspondence was a letter from Tatham Engineering concerning the location of the swale on the property in relation to the existing shed. And just as a reminder, the three minor variances requested through this application, the increased lot coverage of 38.9%, where 35% is normally permitted, a reduced interior yard setback of 0.9 meters, where 1.5 meters is normally required, and a reduced rear yard setback of 1.4 meters, where 1.5 is normally required. Just a reminder to the committee of the motion that was passed back in February, just deferring the application pending the receipt of additional information, which may include peer review at the expense of the applicant, and further that the application be brought back to the committee on or before this meeting in consideration of the Planning Act notice and review requirements. This is just a key map of the subject property shown here in red. It is located within the Greenwood Landings development in the settlement area of Coldwater. And the 2024 aerial imagery, you can sort of see the shed in the rear yard here, and then the deck has been constructed off the back of the house. As was presented in the staff report, as no new information was received by the township in time to be considered, the staff report did recommend the same decision as was recommended at the February meeting. However, since then, new information has been provided by the applicant after the preparation and publishing of the staff report. The applicant has requested further deferral, both of which those pieces of correspondence were provided to the committee in advance of tonight's meeting. Township staff would not object to that deferral request to allow for peer review of the new information, being that letter from Tatham Engineering. Just noting that peer review cost would be at the applicant's expense. Should the committee wish to consider this, township staff would recommend that another deadline be imposed on that deferral, just given the building without a permit concerns. And then just a reminder that there is a fee for a deferral request, and the costs that would be associated with the peer review would be at the applicant's expense. I do have a revised motion for the committee considering the deferral if you wish to entertain that. However, if there's any questions, more than happy to answer. And the property owners and applicants are in attendance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to address the committee?
Yes. I do have the correspondence. You have it? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Dwight Pieter, and my wife Vicky is here as well as our neighbor. And I did address the committee in February with our minor variance request. So just to give you some context of what we've been doing in the interim, and to correct the record, actually, we did provide a new documentation as of May 13th, 2025 to the township planner. That was a document that is our title document. It was provided from our lawyer, and it was noted that there was no new information. I feel that's pertinent in that I asserted at our meeting previous that we are not in any possession of any legal document that articulates a swale on our property, or any document that articulates any easement on our property restricting building. So the title document is pertinent in that it supports my claim, and it shows no record of either a swell feature or any easement on our property. So I just want to bring the committee's attention to that. We had some email discussions with the town planner in May, and recollecting our last committee meeting, we basically asked for township to, if you will, show some due diligence in verifying the observations of a building inspector who, while inspecting our deck, made observations that our shed was built in a swale. And we invited the township to come to our property. The subdivision is still under construction. It's still an active building site. We invited them to come out because the assertion of the building inspector is simply that. It is an assertion. And we are not in receipt of anything, and there has been nothing presented to say that, in fact, our shed is in the swale. And this is very concerning to me, not because it is the onus of the township to prove that. Clearly, that onus rests with me in asking for the variance request. But that is all that is before this committee. It is an assertion of a building inspector who, I was present, looked from my deck, snapped a picture of our shed, and everything has followed from that assertion, including the comments of Severin's consulting engineer. Now, I know it's not, I know you recognize this, but there is nothing in any of the materials received or presented by the planners that say we are 6 inches into the swale, or 8 inches, or 4 inches, or 1 inch. There is nothing. And I know that's not their onus, but their onus is to show due diligence in a case like this. We, on the other hand, have provided I think, a very comprehensive rebuttal to the staff report that was presented. And I do want to refer to that so I am clear that in the staff report presented, D25005, presented by the township on February 18th. During the site inspection, the building inspector noted that a deck had been constructed without the benefit of a building permit. and that a shed had been constructed in the rear yard drainage swale. And so I ask you to be pragmatic and consider this, because everything, including the comments of the Severin consulting engineer, follows that assertion. And this is why, for a homeowner, I am now tasked, and I accept the burden because I'm asking for a variance to prove. We presented I think, as I say, a comprehensive presentation. We had photographs that accompanied it. I addressed my due diligence in being present during the construction of the swale, knowing essentially where it was in proximity and doing my best, taking my best due diligence to build a way back and behind the swale. And we showed photographic evidence to demonstrate that. We in the meantime, over the course of, since the previous committee meeting, did retain Tatham. Now, Tatham, as they say in their letter, is not just any engineering firm. They are the engineering firm that was retained to do the originally retained by the subdivision developer to provide engineering design services for both the overall Greenwood subdivision and the individual lot grading plans for the subject property, 157 Brandon. In my view, they already have a clear working relationship with Severin, and they've been relied upon. In fact, they were relied upon to create the plan for the swell in question. So that same company has come to my property because no other engineer has come to my property, and they have measured and they have created a survey that's included in our documentation. Now, we would have liked to have presented this earlier. We retained, my first meeting with Tatham Engineering was June 4th, and we have been communicating with them, and we simply received their final drafts and documentation certified actually Thursday night. I see that they are dated August 15th. We received them Thursday evening, and they were here on the morning of the 15th. Again, they were here not before the 15th of July, but they were here prior to the finalized agenda for this meeting. However, my point being, as a homeowner, faced with, if you will, I hate to say, proving a negative. We are sort of, battling against an assertion, and we have made our comprehensive presentation with the photographs. We have provided our title document to support some of my information, and now, at our own costs, we retain Tatham Engineering, who have produced a letter, and for your consideration. And I will just, to emphasize, in summary, we confirm that the shed is not constructed within the existing swale and does not interfere with the existing stormwater drainage patterns as per the approved engineering plans. This is created by Chris Underwood, a senior technologist, and signed off by Randy Simpson, a professional engineer and the manager of land development at Tatham Engineering. So, as homeowners, we don't go through these processes on a regular basis. But we sent an email pursuant to our meeting after if I know you are very familiar with our record snowfall and the subsequent flooding conditions that occurred. Certainly Coldwater was affected. So I can tell you that our property was not affected, that the swell in place did its job. We had no issues, and our sump pump did not even activate, which is much more than I can say for many, many other peoples who were affected. So again, in proving a negative, all that I can tell you is, from my perspective as a homeowner, apart from an engineer certified letter and drawing, is that our shed, as constructed, has been in position now for 23 months. And it was in position during, you know, a historic snowfall followed by rain and flooding conditions. And our property, the water flowed as intended from our property down to the Gill Street ditches. My point is this: the drainage works. It is not impeded by the construction of my shed. And I can say that as a homeowner because our adjacent properties or ours were not affected by, I don't know if you'd call it a 100-year flood, but it was pretty remarkable conditions this spring in Coldwater. So we did ask, pursuant to the meeting, we wrote to the planner and said, we invite you to come to see our shed yourself. We believe the consulting engineer would benefit from seeing its position as well. And perhaps when he's in the neighborhood, because as I've said, Greenwood Landing is still under construction. As a homeowner, again, not being involved with these things, I do want to refer to our response, because I will move to the notion of asking for a deferral. We received a response, and a couple of paragraphs in the response are this: as discussed during the meeting and slide demonstration, the location of the shed was prepared. Was prepared using a scalable lot grading plan prepared and certified by Tatham Engineering. The shed was then added to the plan using the scale to ensure the size was generally accurate and the setback from the property lines as intended through the minor variance application. I understand that you may not believe the swale is located as shown on the certified lot grading plan. However, the township has not been presented with any information or material by a qualified professional to the contrary. 2 points. We've heard a lot of reference to the lot grading plan, the certified lot grading plan, and you've been showing it at different points during this presentation. And I have it before me again, another copy, and this is certified. And it is a lot grading plan, Greenwood Subdivisions, Lot 4, model home. That's our residence now at 157. And I don't know if you have this before you, but this is what keeps getting referred to. Yes, it is a certified grading plan. This certified grading plan makes no mention of a swale running through our yard. There is a feature on it, and it is in the legend, it is listed as a proposed ditch. And that feature is not cited on the property and not shown in any dimension. And this document continually is referred to by the township as something that is demonstrative of the swale on our property. So I've said earlier, I am not in possession of any legal documents that cite the swale on our property, and I maintain that. And I ask you to consider the limitations of this particular document as it's used. And that paragraph that I just read it did refer to that drawing that showed up which we had never seen before. And it was simply placed, a shed placed on this. And it was placed over the swale. Well, you've seen my photographs. They are actual pictures. And now we're accompanied by a letter of an engineer who went out and measured and is providing a certified letter to show it's not in the swale. And so I will continue with the email. Severn Township installed the swale. So it's my guess that there was an approved plan for the swale. So why haven't we heard about the approved plan? How wide it is, what the dimensions are, what was installed? We're pointed to this, which simply identifies a proposed ditch. Back to my title document. We took possession of the house. There was no swale. We were living in the house when the swale was installed. I watched it being installed, and I built my shed according to what I saw, because there is no document as a homeowner that I could point to say, you know, hey, what are the exact dimensions? Nonetheless, I avoided it, and that again is proven by Tatham's report, which is independent, and we took a risk. We went to Tatham, we paid money for this. The outcome could have been, sorry, chum, you're in the swale. That could have been an outcome. I have no control over their measurements. I simply hired them to do their thing, and they did. And that's the outcome. The other paragraph of this email says township staff and the consulting engineer could attend the property to undertake an inspection. However, this would be at your expense and may not provide you with the required materials information necessary to bring the application back to the committee for consideration. We were on deferral. We had a date with you. That doesn't sound right to me. That sounds like we might, but you know, it might not serve you in any way. Well, I have to tell you, quite frankly, if it came back and said, you know, we are in the swale, which I say is a risk when we retain, then that is an outcome. You know, and I guess I would have to accept that outcome or challenge it through an engineer or whatever the case may be. But the point is, it goes on to say the initial peer review deposit amount for a committee of adjustments applications is $4,500, and it would need to be received by the township prior to scheduling an inspection. Any money remaining in the account would be refunded upon closing the file. Should you wish to bring the application back to the committee for decision, you will need to provide confirmation of the location of the swale on the subject lands in relation to the shed from a qualified professional engineer or land surveyor. We have provided that. The township's engineer may assist with this as outlined above. However, that may not be the case. Therefore, as a first step, you may wish to connect with Tatham Engineering as they prepared the certified and attached lot grading plan, which was used by staff to prepare the site plan as noted above. That is the drawing that was placed on here, that was shown to you, that was apparently to scale, which was not. So the point is, leads us back to this grading plan, which does not even have a swale on it. There are no dimensions to the swale and to the feature. It's legend as a proposed ditch. So the email goes on to say the township's engineer cannot prepare plans for you as they work on behalf of the township in the public interest and not individual property owner. Now, reading earlier, it sounded to me like that was an option as long as we paid the price. So my point is, with respect to this, we did retain engineering services of Tatham, who produced some products for us. We've presented them to you. And we're now being told that this will have to be deferred for peer review and at further expense to us. And that we have to request a deferral because that's the administrative route to that. So as a homeowner, appreciating there are administrative features of every process. Any deferral that you receive from us, you will see is addressed as I titled it a provisional deferral because we're not inclined to ask for a deferral. You know, we appreciate we were deferred to this date, and we believe that we've put in front of you compelling and appropriate evidence to lead you to a pragmatic decision in this case as far as the location of the shed goes. As outlined here, my request for minor variance was in relation to the property setbacks related to the shed and in relation to our lot coverage. I did not request a variance with respect to the swale because I had no reason to do that. But my position is, and always has been, I was not affecting the drainage of the land, and I had built purposely outside of the area of that swale. And that remains my position, and our position now is supported by a very reputable local engineering firm. And beyond that, the actual technician that did the grading plan and oversaw the installation of the swale on the property in question, our property. So in any event, this is where I'm at I appreciate process, but I am somewhat confused by the necessity, and I'm sure I will be corrected, but I'm concerned. It seems to me that if there are further requirements of the township to review our certified letter and drawing, that the deferral of this matter would belong to them. Because our position is that we have presented you with, as I say, compelling, appropriate, accurate, certified documentary evidence on which you can make a decision in this case. This is a minor variance request dealing with setbacks from the property and 3.8% overage on lot coverage. It is not a variance request by me about a swale. This is something incidental to the comments of a building inspector that I have not seen any due diligence to challenge and to kind of confirm the claim of the building inspector. It's just based on words, and everything flowed after that. So what I do is I'm seeking your advice on the deferral. I've included it as a provisional deferral because but I did want to articulate my position. It's somehow, you know, for us to do a referral at cost and then put a deposit down and pay more for a peer review. It doesn't seem appropriate to this particular minor variance request. And I will conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant at all?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing really further to add, just I would reiterate the township staff are supportive of the deferral request. Just imposing that timeline on it, coming back to committee for consideration would be a recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, as we mentioned before, there's no public session for this adjourned application. So now I'm going to turn it over. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Hawkins. Just hold, I think you gotta. There you go.
Through the chair. Now that you received the report from Tatum, now it's not a full site grading plan that you'd have to, I guess the level of peer review or what's required, because mainly they're just giving a site confirmation of the actual location on the site. Does that still require a full peer review, or is that taken as a site inspection report?
Through to township staff.
Through the chair, it would still be, the normal peer review process that the letter would go through. As a smaller municipality, Severn doesn't have an in-house engineer to review those types of submission materials provided in support of development applications, and therefore we use the services of a consulting engineer to do that. The cost of development review is placed onto the applicant so as not to burden the tax base with that expense. We do anticipate that it would be, relatively quick and a more sort of review of that letter and not a full, review of detailed engineering plans and things like that. So it would be sort of a lesser extent to that review. Township staff have internally discussed opportunities to reduce the initial peer review amount, as we do not anticipate that, $4,500 worth of peer review services would be required. So we would be happy to discuss sort of reducing that initial amount to provide as a deposit.
Member Hawkins.
Through the chair, is it still under construction, or a final lot grading approval has been completed?
Through to township staff.
Through the chair to Member Hawkins, I would have to confirm with our building department what the status of the files are. I'm not sure if the property owner knows the status of those, but I can look and confirm.
I know they have done. Like.
I can confirm if I'm at liberty to confirm.
Okay. Oh. Township staff.
Thank you, Chair. I would just add that the subdivision, the overall grading of the subdivision is not yet completed. But just add that.
Any further questions, Member Kish?
Through the chair to township staff, where are swales typically communicated to purchasers and owners? Like how, as a property owner myself, how am I supposed to know that one would exist in my property or not?
Through to township staff.
Thank you, Chair, and through to Member Kish. The swales in this case are identified in the approved plans, which are referenced in the subdivision agreement registered on title to the subject lands.
That is
Not,
inaccurate.
not this swale. This is not on the approved subdivision plan.
It's not G3
Okay.
meeting
So just,
presented to these people as, oh, this is a cross section of the swale.
so
On
Matt,
that LG3, if you want. Sorry.
yeah, ma'am.
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. It's just he's giving them wrong information.
Ms. Mandeville.
Through the chair to the committee, since I'm here, I thought I could weigh in on this as well. it's not always the case that swales or drainage is registered on title to a property. However, in this case, the municipality has a responsibility to look at this swale as the subdivision grading is not complete. We're still actively working with the developer on this subdivision. Additionally, there's civil liabilities involved if you were to negatively impact the drainage of your neighbor's property. So when drainage is allowed and naturally occurring or previously occurring on a property, and you do some kind of development that then negatively impacts another neighbor in terms of drainage flow, there's civil liabilities involved in that. So typically, if there's not a drainage easement in place and someone disrupts the drainage, the municipality says this is a civil issue and we don't weigh into it. However, in this situation, because the property owner is asking for a minor variance, which is an approval through the Planning Act, we do have to look at those items because the tests of a minor variance include, is it appropriate and desirable development? And how can we as township staff and as the Committee of Adjustment, in my opinion, say it's appropriate and desirable development if it has the potential to negatively impact someone else's drainage? So because of that, and because this drainage was shown on the lot grading plan, not as a registered easement, but just shown on there, this is a brand new subdivision, something still under construction. That's why we are looking at that in this case, because they've applied for a minor variance. If they were not applying for a minor variance, it would be a civil issue. If they needed to apply for a building permit, it would be covered under the building permit, because I'm not an expert in the Ontario Building Code. However, under the Ontario Building Code, you also have a liability to not negatively impact your neighbor's drainage. So that's the reason we're talking about the swale, is because we're here talking about a minor variance for a reduced setback. And we don't, as staff, as has been communicated, we don't know where that swale was supposed to be in relation to where the shed is. So now, as of Friday, we received information from Tatham. The staff report was already completed by the time the information from Tatham came in, and therefore, we have not had a chance to send it to our consulting engineer. We also would never send it to our consulting engineer without a peer review deposit unless we do that and then put that onus, that financial onus, on the taxpayers' tax account, because we don't burden the general tax base with site-specific development inquiries. And this is a site-specific development situation because they have applied for a minor variance. If they did not apply for a minor variance, it would be captured under the building permit if they needed one. If they didn't need a building permit, it would be a civil issue and we wouldn't be talking about it. But because they need a minor variance, that's where this call comes into play. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity for everyone. As the committee will know, I understand, regular property owners probably don't understand the process, but the fact that we don't have a township engineer on staff does save the general tax base money. And that's why people have to pay for individual consulting engineers as well as the township's engineer.
Thank you. Member Bossy.
Question to staff through the chair. So the original drainage plan for the subdivision, does that get peer reviewed too?
Through to staff.
Through the chair, yes. All of the engineering plans prepared by the developer in support of the original subdivision plan were peer reviewed.
Member Kish.
I guess, I don't know, question / point of information, I'll say. With the interior side yard setback that's being requested of 0.9 meters, the information that was provided by Tatham shows a 0.48 meter. So I just want to make sure that when and if we're moving forward with minor variances, that we're talking about the appropriate numbers so that we don't have to come back and revise something. The rear yard setback was requested at 1.4 meters. Tatham shows 2.1 meters. Again, whether or not verified needs review, that's a different point. But at that point, I don't believe that one would be subject to a minor variance anymore, being it's over the 1.5. So just wanted to highlight that so that everybody's on the same page so that we don't have to come back and lower a number down to something less.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
I do say, and I appreciate, your, Katie's comments regarding this. And I have to note that as a property owner, it's very strange to me that the people responsible for the installation of a swale across the property that I pay taxes on, that I bought the house new, have no idea where it is. If that's what I'm led to believe, because this is a little bit strange to me that they would not have any idea where it is. That there has to be a reliance that the property owner, I guess I'm to believe that the only sighting of this feature has been done at our expense by a reputable engineering firm. And now there's going to be the proposal that there would be a sort of shortened or assessment peer review of it. And looking back where it was like, can somebody come out and verify the statement of the building inspector? Building inspector did not inspect my shed while he was on the property. Like, so being subject, like new buildings interfering and this type of thing, it just, it sort of, it is somewhat striking to me. And I appreciate that the deferral is being characterized as a deferral request, but as per my note, it's sort of, if it's required, then we have no other option. So if there is a deferral request, it's somewhat under protest by me. And I realize the fee that accompanies it, which I don't know. Given what really is the case, and it apparently requires a level of peer review, that is not at my request. My point is that there is a certified letter from a reputable engineer before you. And that, but if there is a procedural thing, maybe perhaps we can waive the fee for the deferral, because I think the township and we share this in this particular case, the deferral aspect of this case. Our intention, as per the email, was to bring proof of the location of the swell as we were instructed, which we have provided to this deferred meeting today, which we have put before you. There was talk about peer review, but it may or may not happen. And I guess I wonder about the necessity in a particular case. That's all. So I will leave it there now, but I just wanted to raise that some of the comments here about, we now know where it is because we have presented an engineering survey that we paid for. This, I'm just saying there, that seems very strange. As a tax-paying homeowner in Severn, that comment seems very strange to me. And so that's all I can do is urge that I appreciate if there's some consideration to a shortened review of this particular file, as it's coming from Tathan Engineering, a trusted partner of the township, no doubt. And maybe there's some consideration to the waiving of fees. I don't know, because when it's put out there that there's a $4,500 deposit. So what is a break on that? $3,500? I don't know. It seems very nebulous and possible, given some of what's taking place here, that there is then, although it's a half price sale, that still is, we're still at $2,500 for a peer review that I have to say, if it has to occur, it has to occur, because administratively I can't really usurp that, I realize. But is it necessary? Is it necessary in this case? That's what I put to you. And I am grateful for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Township staff, what's the cost for a deferral?
Through the chair, the cost of a deferral is $298.
Okay, and I would ask the question, is a peer review a necessity as part of this application?
Through the chair, township staff would recommend that a peer review be undertaken in this case.
Rakesh?
Just further to that, to my understanding, Tatham is the engineer of record for this. Like, who would be reviewing the engineer of record's work at that point? Like, it seems counterintuitive to me.
Through the chair, the document would be reviewed by Jeff Marshall Engineering, the township's consulting engineer, while Tatham Engineering may be the engineer of record for the developer of the Greenwood Landing subdivision. Even through the subdivision process, all of the engineering design that was prepared by Tatham was still reviewed by the municipal engineer, Mr. Jeff Marshall.
Ms. Mandeville?
Just for the committee's through the chair to the committee, for the committee's consideration, the way a deposit account works, we do them for all the peer reviews at the township, is that a sum of money is given, it's put into a specific account under that address, under that person's name. And then the document in this case would be sent to our engineer. He would review it. He charges an hourly rate in accordance with the agreement with the municipality. And then that invoice is paid from the deposit account. And then whatever is left in the deposit account, once the file is closed, is refunded to the applicant. So it's a set fee, if you will, in our fees and charges bylaw, which is a public document, that it's a $4,500 deposit for committee of adjustment. But that could, as the committee's aware, that goes towards environmental peer review. That goes towards any reports and studies that are ever submitted by a qualified person. And that's why we had some internal discussions. It is at the discretion of our director of planning sometimes to waive fees in accordance with the delegation bylaw. And that's why we have had internal discussions, because staff really don't anticipate it's going to be anywhere near $4,500, because as we've discussed, it's not a large document that's being reviewed. It's just the fact that we don't have a professional engineer on staff. So we're not professional engineers. We don't have engineering expertise. And therefore, that's why we utilize engineers for that.
Okay, thank you. I know in the past, this is kind of, when I think about this application, we imposed the date to bring it back, obviously, because there's building without a permit concerns and so on and so forth. I understand the way the world works and stuff gets delayed and all that. Does the committee have an option to waive the deferral fee for this application? Or does the applicant have to provide correspondence and ask for the waiving of the fee later on? Ms. Mandeville?
Through or to the chair's question, I suppose. Typically so in the fees and charges bylaw, the deferral fee is for when the applicant requests a deferral. So in this case, staff wrote a report that recommended a denial. So the applicant's requesting a deferral. So, if the committee chooses to defer it because the committee wants further information, then the committee is not, utilizing the request for a deferral. And therefore, I would say that you could be of the opinion that the fee wouldn't apply. And typically, the process is that you write a letter and the director of planning can decide if you get your fees refunded. It's delegated to her. But in this case, since the applicant doesn't want a deferral, I would say that the committee probably could say that they're deferring it, and therefore it's not an applicant requested deferral and the fee wouldn't apply.
Anybody comment on that? No? Okay. So what I'm hearing is for Member Hawkins.
Sorry, just quickly to add in with the motion that we had on the table. If we're talking about the deferral of the shed portion, but we are still talking about the deck kind of separately, right? Like the deck minor variance, the lot coverage.
The lot coverage one we could.
That's what I'm thinking.
Ms. Mandeville.
Administratively, through the chair to Member Hawkins, I would suggest if the committee's in favor of deferral, that they would defer the entire application. It's just easier from a staff administrative point of view. I think the recommended motion, as it previously was to deny part of the application and approve part of the application. So I think it would be staff's preference, if you are going to defer a portion, to just defer the entirety, and then we'll bring back the entire application.
I think I'd be in support of that, and I'd be in support of the committee making the decision to defer the application instead of the applicant or the township. So I'm in support of a deferral. Seeing a bunch of shaking heads, I'm going to call in a motion for deferral based on committee decision. Yeah, township staff has asked for 2 to 3 months. So Ms. Mandeville.
Just for the committee's consideration, I would suggest the committee would defer it for more information, including the peer review.
Yep.
But that, of course, is up to the committee. I think it looks like the planners have a motion that you might want to work with. Just a reminder, it is up to the committee what you want this motion to say.
I'm good with that. Anybody else? I think we're good with that. I think this would be pretty, I think we'll be back here. We might possibly be back here by September at the earliest. So, so I'm good with that. So I'm going to move forward with the motion. So I have a motion before us identified as COA 2025-038. Moved by Member Hiles, second by Member Kish, that staff report D25-027 be received, and that the matter of minor variance application A-03-25, the application be deferred by the committee pending additional information, including peer review at the expense of the applicant, and further that the application be brought forward to the committee at or before the November 18, 2025 meeting in consideration of Planning Act notice and review requirements, or the file be closed. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? We are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. You are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. So we are moving on to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
We're moving forward to new applications identified as E1, which is an application for consent identified as EO225, an application for minor variance identified as A-18-25 and A-19-25.
Thank you, Chair. As noted, the first new application on our agenda this evening is a concurrent consent and 2 minor variance applications affecting the lands recognized as 12530 and 12532 County Road 16. Through this process, the applicants are proposing, as mentioned, consent and minor variance applications to facilitate the creation of 1 new lot. The property the committee may recall, the property was previously the subject of a consent application B 1321 that has not been completed and is currently the subject of an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Since the circulation of the notice of the applications before you this evening, the applicant's lawyer has requested a deferral of the application to allow opportunity to provide further information in support of the application. As advertised, their table 1, as shown on screen, indicates the proposed lot fabric, indicating that the severed lands is requested to have a lot frontage of 120 meters, retained lands having a frontage of 50 meters. Lot area of the severed lands requested to be 12,600 square meters, retained lands 4,000 square meters. The requested minor variances received with respect to the concurrent consent application are to address the proposed lot areas. Correspondence received with respect to this application is advertised. Enbridge Gas does not object to the proposed applications. However, they reserve the right to amend or remove development conditions. This response does not signify an approval for the site or development. It is the responsibility of the applicant to verify the existing gas service to ensure it doesn't encroach on one more property. The cost, should that be required, would be the responsibility of the property owner. As shown on screen, I'll provide a summary of the application briefly. As shown on screen, the property is located between FR Nelson Road and County Road 16. It's a through lot that technically has frontage on both sides. The property, as you can see, is currently developed with a single detached dwelling and various other structures. The subject lands have, although it has 2 addresses, it is one single parcel of land, hence the request for new lot creation. This is the proposed consent set as submitted by the applicants with their application. And as noted, I would just reiterate that a written request for deferral of the application was received from the applicant's lawyer to defer the application to a future committee meeting. Planning and development staff have no objections of the deferral of the application at the request of the applicants and their agents. Staff do have a recommended motion to consider deferral of the application. The applicants are aware of the required deferral fee associated with that. The applicant's agent is in attendance this evening and may wish to address the committee. So that's all I have at this point, but certainly available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on the applicant's agent, if they so wish, to present any relevant information on the application. You're free to unmute yourself. You got your camera on. You're good to go.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Paul Demzcak with Batory Planning and Management. I'm the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant. There's no other additional information. On behalf of my applicant, my client, we do request a deferral for this evening, just to have an opportunity to address some of the staff concerns and comments we received.
Perfect. Thank you very much. As this is subject to a public meeting, I'm going to carry on. So do township staff have any further to add to the materials or information presented by the applicant or their agent?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add at this time.
Okay. Are there any persons who are participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? You can unmute your mics and ask the questions, but I'm seeing none. So are there any persons in attendance who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? Seeing none, I declare the public portion of the application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? Member Bossy?
Question to staff. On attachment 2, there's a in lane to a house. Is that a separate property?
Staff, township staff?
Thank you through the chair to Member Bossy. As indicated, the properties are a single, despite having 2 addresses, the small parcel of land surrounded by the larger parcel of land are a single property.
Seeing no further questions, and a call for a motion for deferral. I have a motion before us identified as COA 2025-039, moved by member Bossy, second by member Hawkins, that staff report D25-026 be received, and that the matter of consent application B-02-25, the application be deferred to a future committee meeting as per the applicant's request, and further that the applicant provide the required $298 per the township's user fee and charges bylaw prior to the application returning to a future committee meeting. And a call for a vote. All those in, oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. The motion is incorrect and doesn't match the one in the staff report. If you mind if I just take a second to edit it. The only change would be that the consent and minor variance applications be deferred. I
Okay.
think there was just a carryover issue there, but I can modify that.
Yeah,
now.
no problem.
Thank you.
Just hold on. It's 3 numbers. Okay, so I now have a motion before us identified as COA 2025-039, moved by member Bossy, second by member Hawkins, that staff report D25-026 be received, and that in the matter of consent application B-02-25 and minor variance applications A-18-25 and A-19-25 be deferred to a future committee meeting as per the applicant's request, and further that the applicant provide the required fee of $298 per the township's user fees and charges bylaw prior to the application returning to a future committee meeting. A call for a vote. All those in favor, we are carried. So the hearing for this application is now closed. You are in any interested parties are free to stay for the remainder of the meeting or leave as the committee moves on to the next application. Would township staff briefly introduce E2, which is an application for minor variance identified as A-20-25.
Thank you, Chair. As noted, minor variance application A-20-25 for the lands located at 3016 Hampshire Mills Line, which I actually believe is 3061 Hampshire Mills Line. This application was formerly identified as A-18-25. However, we had to administratively adjust that, so it is now known as A-20-25. So this application proposes 2 minor variances to facilitate the construction of an attached private garage to a single detached dwelling. The 2 variances requested are an increased accessory building size, a size of 125 square meters, which represents 22.5% of the floor area of the concurrently proposed dwelling. Whereas the zoning bylaw would normally only permit 75%, or sorry, the lesser of 75% or 110 square meters. And together with that, an increased building height of 5.17 meters, whereas the bylaw normally would permit 5 meters. In terms of correspondence received on this application, there was no comments or objections received from the clerk's office, the Public Works Department, or the Fire and Emergency Services Department. The building department did advise that while they have no objection to the application, building permits will be required prior to starting any construction, and that they would undertake a full review of the application once a complete building permit application has been submitted. That is the intro and the correspondence for this application. The applicant is in attendance, and I will turn it over. Thank you.
Perfect. I now call on the applicant to, if they so wish, to please present the application together with any relevant information. You're good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Unless you guys have. I don't know.
Okay, so it's all good. So did township staff have anything further to add?
Sure. I'll just give you a little bit more of an intro here. So the subject lands are identified in red here as 3061 Hampshire Mills Line, located on the east side of Hampshire Mills, approximately halfway between Stockdale Road and Cambrian Road. The 2024 aerial imagery, you can see a majority of the property is well treed with mature vegetation. There are some existing clearings here closer to Hampshire Mills line. I will point out to the committee that there is an existing single detached dwelling located in this area here, together with an existing detached garage. Both of those structures are proposed to be demolished in order to accommodate the new proposed dwelling and garage, with which the property owner is in the works of entering into a demolition agreement with the municipality to facilitate that. This is the site plan. It's a little bit challenging to see, but I'll see if I can zoom in a bit here. So you can see the proposed dwelling, which is this portion of the building, and then the proposed attached garage here. Just a couple of the building elevation drawings. I wanted to highlight to the committee that with the design of the building, this elevation is what you will see from the road. So the garage has been designed to essentially be hidden kind of with the design of the building. So you won't see the 4 bays as you're traveling up and down the road. It will just appear to be part of the dwelling. And then you can see here the 4 bays given the design of the dwelling when you're looking at it from the side. Just a couple of photos here, not a whole lot to see, an empty field where the house is going to be built. I will point out that, and I'm not sure if any of the committee members were there, but the applicant did take some effort and stake out the proposed building. So it was really helpful to see that on site and get the context as to where it was being sited. In summary, as described in staff report D25-028, township staff are of the opinion that the application is consistent with the PPS and meets the 4 tests as required under the Act. And for those reasons, township staff have no objections to the approval of the application, subject to the recommended conditions as outlined in the staff report. Pretty standard conditions here, just the taxes are paid to date, the construction is in substantial compliance, the plan submitted with the application, and that the existing vegetation on the property be preserved and enhanced as much as possible. Thank you.
Perfect. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to the application? We have nobody. There is nobody here in attendance, aside from the applicant that wants to speak to this application. So I declare the public portion of the application closed. Do any members of the committee require further clarification or wish to provide comments on this application? We are live here and on YouTube. So I'm seeing none. So I'm going to call for a motion. So I have a motion before us identified as COA 2025-040, moved by member Kish, second by member Hawkins, that staff report D25-028 be received, and further that minor variance application A-20-25 be approved, subject to the conditions included as attachment 5 to staff report D25-028. And I call for a vote. All those in favor, we are carried. The hearing for this application is now closed. So we're going to move on. So would township staff briefly introduce the application? Any written response to the notice circulated for agenda E3, which is an application for cancellation consent identified as B-05-25.
Thank you, Chair. The last application of this evening is cancellation of consent B-05-25 for the lands known municipally as 1152 Apter Lane. The subject lands are zoned Shoreline Residential 3 and located within the Greenlands and Shoreline Residential Land Use designation of the Township of Severn official plan. The subject lands were created through an unstipulated consent in 2014. The applicant is proposing a cancellation of this consent, allowing the property to legally merge with the provisionally approved severed lands of consent application B-11-23. In 2024, consent application B-11-23 was provisionally approved by the Committee of Adjustment to sever a portion of 1300 Torpet Road and add it to 1152 Apter Lane. The cancellation of consent application proposed today seeks to facilitate the 2014 severance and addition to 1152 Apter Lane. There's no correspondence received for this application, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Is the applicant or do they have? Okay, so I'm going to call on the applicant or their agent to please present the application together with any relevant information. You're free to unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Hello, my name is Pieter Dejonge, and I'm presenting this application. The purpose of it was to correct an encroach to move the boundary line. It was just a boundary line adjustment, and that was conditionally approved. And then, in order to do that, the Township of Severn requested that we provide a cancellation certificate such that that particular piece that is being severed and transferred over to 1152 Apter Lane, that can never again be severed on its own. And so that's what the cancellation is, I believe.
Okay. Do township staff have anything further to add to the materials and information presented by the applicant?
Yes, I can just add some further. Thank you, Chair. I can just add some further context to the application for the committee. As stated, the subject lands were created through an unstipulated consent subject to Section 5012 of the Planning Act, authorized by the Committee of Adjustment in 2014. This means that despite being held in common ownership, 1152 Apter Lane will remain separately conveyable from the surrounding parcels of land. Committee should be familiar with the phrase, once a consent, always a consent. So the subject lands are located along the western shoreline of Sparrow Lake, as shown in teal, and 1300 Torpet Road is shown in yellow. Here, small, there is a green parcel of land, and that is the severed lands of consent application B-11-23, which is to be added to 1152 Apter Lane. Currently, as can be seen here, there's a right-of-way providing access to the dwelling at 1152 Apter Lane. However, an additional driveway has been built just slightly north of that to access a detached accessory building on the property, which, as the applicant stated, encroaches on 1300 Torpet Road. To correct the encroachment, consent application B-11-23 was provisionally approved by the committee in 2024 to sever a 0.165 hectare portion of 1300 Torpet Road and add it to 1152 Apter Lane. Just to give some context to the cancellation certificates, as they're a relatively new thing, on January 1st, 2022, Section 5345 of the Planning Act was introduced, allowing an owner of land that was previously conveyed with a consent to apply for the cancellation of such consent. This section allows approval authorities such as the committee to issue cancellation certificates. The effect of the certificate in this situation would be from the time that it is registered on title, Section 5012 would no longer apply to the parcel, and the subject lands 1152 Apter Lane would no longer be considered to have been conveyed by unstipulated consent, thereby facilitating the merger of 1152 Apter Lane and the severed lands of B-11-23, which would correct the encroachment. Therefore, the issuance of the certificate would fulfill the conditions set by the Committee of Adjustment in the provisional approval of consent application B-11-23. Just to give a little bit of a more close-up view on the lands that are going to be added to 1152 Apter Lane, along with the driveway right-of-way access coming off of Apter Lane there.
As you can see, it's a relatively small parcel of land with no shoreline frontage that only seeks to correct the encroachment on 1300 Torpet Road. As there are no statutory requirements or criteria required for a cancellation certificate, it is generally understood that the cancellation certificate process does not involve any planning issues, and the result would be minor changes to 2 existing parcels of land and the correction of an existing encroachment. Upon completion of the lot boundary adjustment, each parcel will continue to comply with the lot requirements of their respective zones. No objections or comments were received from other township staff, and as such, planning and development staff have no objections to the approval of the application. And to reiterate once again, the approval of this cancellation of consent application is required to facilitate the former provisional approval of consent application B-11-23. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any persons participating virtually by Zoom who have either questions or wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this application? It's probably not subject to a public meeting. So is this application subject to a public meeting?
Through the chair, no, this application is not subject to a
Okay.
public meeting.
Well, we have nobody here, so do any members of the committee require clarification on this application? Seeing none, you did an outstanding job, so I'm going to call for a motion. So I have a motion before us, COA-2025-041, moved by member Heil, second by member Bossy, that staff report D25-029 be received, and further that in the matter of cancellation of consent application B-05-25 be approved. All those in favor? We are carried. Gonna move on to adjournment. So I call for a motion. Motion COA 2025-042, moved by member Heil, second by member Hawkins. The Committee of Adjustment be adjourned at 8:02 p.m. on Tuesday, August 19, 2025. Call for a vote. All those in favor? Carried.